Page 34, the Bass Clef. Not the name of a piece necessarily, but that's what they're presenting here on this page of the Bass Clef. I haven't presented any videos on anything prior to this page on this book, but I'll briefly talk about them now. On page 6 and 7, they give you some various warm-ups for whatever. I'm not sure exactly what they're after. This is a struggle I deal with in doing these videos, is I have a certain way of teaching, and it's not necessarily the same as what's presented in the book. So how do you reconcile that? Do I teach a bunch of stuff I don't agree with? Because it's like these warm-ups away from on these pages that they're presenting, to me, is a complete waste of time. But they're presented in the book. If you want to go through them, that's entirely. Other teachers, I'm sure, will find them very helpful and say, oh yes, we need to do this. Fine, do them. But I don't really talk about it much. If you want to warm up, you go right ahead. On page 8 and 9, they get into the posture. Well, again, they get very detailed with the posture. As far as I'm concerned, as far as how you sit at the piano, you need to be comfortable. So what posture are you? I mean, it's a good posture. Don't slouch. You know, sit comfortably, a nice, strong posture, you're fine. And when you put your hands on the piano, just relax and let them just, they'll curve. You don't force them to curve or anything. You don't want any tension or as little tension as you can, so just put the hands on the piano and don't do it straight onto the piano like that. Some method books teach that. It's a natural angle here. The hand is not presented directly, it's at an angle. Just let it wherever. That's okay. You don't have to force anything here. You know, I don't agree with grab something or a ball or something. Just relax and let the fingers curve by themselves. So just put it on there. And there's no set curve. I mean, we got famous pianists, some play with flat fingers and some play with very curved fingers. It's a personal thing. All in all, just let them relax. Just stay in the, you know. On page 10, they talk about the finger numbers. Now this is important, but you're going to use it so much you'll get it. The thumbs are 1 and the little finger's 5, and you can, because we need to know sometimes on which finger to use to play which note, and by telling us the finger number, that tells us which finger to use, and that's what that's about. Page 11, they introduce some dynamic signs. Now, I want to wait and talk about these in the pieces, so I don't feel any need to learn this separately. We'll talk about this later. On pages 12 and 13, then now they're talking a little more about the keyboard. You can see on a standard keyboard, and if you have a short keyboard, that's okay. Use what you have. I have a full-size 88-key keyboard, so that's what I'm talking about. But you have white and black keys, and the black keys are in groups of 2 and 3, alternating. It's this pattern that tells us what the notes are, because the names of the notes are not on the keys unless you put them on yourself. But believe me, when you get to playing music, you don't have time to read the notes on the keys. You got to know what the note is already, so the sooner you learn the notes on the keys, the better. But we will work on that a little later. Just understand that these patterns tell us what the names of the white keys are, where they are in relation to the pattern, where the white key is located. We'll cover it all. There's only 7 of them to learn, so no. And they also talk about the damper pedal. I prefer to wait till later to talk about the damper pedal. For right now, what my suggestion to you is keep your feet off those pedals. Don't use them at all. Just, they're nice to have later, just not now. On pages 14 and on, then they're starting to talk about the different symbols used in music notation. We have to know all of these, but we're going to use them a lot, and I'm going to talk about them a lot. I prefer to talk about them in the actual music and not separately. But you need to know, like that quarter note, and they give an example at the top of the page. It's a solid round circle, sort of, an oval, whatever, with a stem, a line. We call it a stem. That's a quarter note. What it does and all that junk, we'll talk about a little later. And then next they give the quarter rest and what it looks like. We'll talk about that later. And they give these little warm-ups where with finger numbers, and they tell you you can do all that on your own. I'm not interested. I want to get to where we actually reading music is where I'm trying to get to. And they also start introducing what we call rhythm. Rhythm is long and short notes. When do you play a note? But again, I prefer to talk about that in the music, so I'm going to hold off until we get to the music to talk about rhythm. So if you want to go through the first 2 units of the book on your own, just go through. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask me, but I'll cover all that stuff, but I want to do it in the pieces. So let's talk about this stuff on page 34. They're introducing a symbol called a bass clef. It's that weird looking thing with the 2 dots. It's also known as an F clef. You see in the middle of the page you got these 5 lines, this group of 5 lines. It's called a staff. And the notes are placed in the spaces or the lines on these 5 lines. You can see there, they're all over the place. Well, that's all well and good, but we need something to tell us which note is what note. Doesn't make any sense at all, did it? See, the note names are letters. The first 7 letters of the alphabet, A through G. There's no H. A through G. Once you get to G, if you want to keep going, you start over at A. It just loops. So there's only 7 notes to learn. That's not that bad, I hope. But we need to know which line or space is which letter. And the bass clef tells us that by those 2 dots. It's, as I said, called an F clef, with a line that goes between those 2 dots is an F. And on the piano, an F, you look at a group of 3 black keys, and an F is the lower white note at the bottom of a group of 3. We got lots of Fs on the piano. Lots of Fs. So we need to know which F are we talking about. Well, toward the middle of the keyboard, you just go down, it's toward your left side just a little bit, and that's the F we're talking about. And that is the note that you would play if a note were on that line between those dots. Now, if you know where that note is, you can figure out any of the others by going up or down the alphabet. You go line space, line space, line space. Each one is a letter, either depending on if you're going up or going down. You can calculate it. That might help you out at first if you're not sure what a note is, but eventually you got to learn them where they're instant, where you look at a note like the first note here in this. It says written exercise away from the keyboard. Well, okay, whatever. Look at that first note in there, and that's on that line between those 2 dots. That's an F. You need to just instantly know that's an F. And you need to know that it is this F on the keyboard. So when you see a note in the music on that line, you play this key on the keyboard. That's the way it works. Now let's go down to the last 2 lines toward the bottom of the page. That open circle with that stem, that's called a half note. So we're gonna be talking about this line, the staff, with all these half notes on it. First note is an F. The next note is the space right above the F, therefore it's a G. And on a piano, a G is in the lower middle. See, on the group of 3, there's 2 middle notes on a group of 3. The G is the lower middle of the 2. That's a G. All G's. Wherever, it doesn't matter. They're all G's. Lots of G's. We love G's. Well, the G we're talking about in this note, this top space in that staff, is this G, right above F. Here. So we went up the staff, we went up the keyboard. Then the next note is another F. Then the next note is a space below the F, so you're going to go down the keyboard, and that note is an E, because if you're doing the alphabet, E comes right before F. And an E, you look at a group of 2, an E is the upper of a group of 2. So you got lots of E's, love them. Well, the E we're talking about here is this E. Then the next note, you go down again, it's the middle line. That's a D. D comes before E. So a D is in the middle of a group of 2. D's, lots of D's. The one we want is this D. So that's the middle line, and then the next note is in the space below that, is going 1 note down, and that is a C. because that's the letter that comes right before D in the alphabet. It's a C. And a C is the lower of a group of 2. So you find all the groups of 2, and the lower note is a C. And that C we're talking about is this one. So we have these notes. Takes time. Take your time. Don't be in a hurry. But you need to be able to say the names of all these notes in the music. And you need to know which key they are on the piano. We've just covered 5 different notes here. These 5. Just threw them at you all at once. Good luck. So you have the F and the G and the F and an E and a D and a C and then a D and an E and some Fs and a G and an F. Those are the notes. Practice this. You can get flashcards. I got these flashcards in one of the local music stores. You can order them online, no big deal. I'll try and remember to add some of these different ones to my Amazon page, because you can get them on Amazon too. They're just flashcards, and these flashcards, they have different symbols on them, and you can go through on the ones you know. Don't try and learn them all at once. Go through on the ones that you've known so far, and you just keep going over them and saying the names of the note here instantly until it's automatic. It's got to be instant eventually, and that's what you're after. On these particular flashcards, on one side it gives you the note, and you're supposed to say the name of the note, and then on the back side of it, it gives the note on the grand staff, which we haven't talked about yet, and where it is on the piano. So that's between the two. One side of a flashcard usually is the test, where you have to answer it, and the other side is the answer, where it gives you the answer. So the flashcards, you know, they're good. The answer is included on the flashcard, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Now, of these 5 notes we've learned, these letter names are the same on all these, because we have the C through the G, C, D, E, F, G, right up the alphabet. And these are all the same, C, D, E, F, G, C, D, E, F, G, C, D, E, F, G, C, D, E, F, G. So on the piano, as far as learning the keys go, there's only 7 to learn, and 5 of them are presented here. You only got 2 left, so you've got most of them already on the first page of our thingy. That's what we're doing here on both of these lines here on this page. We're using these notes, sort of. The second line, I don't think there's a C in it, but nevertheless, you're in here. So on both of these lines, make sure you can say the names of these notes in the music and know where they are on the piano. Now, in order to play the music, we need something that tells us when to play it. When to play a note. Because if you're going to play a note, when do you do it? Well, that's where these numbers come in at the first. You see the 4-4? It's called a time signature. It's very important. The top number tells you how far you have to count. Yeah, we count. There's math involved. So we're counting to 4. The bottom number tells you what you're counting, because if you're going to count something, you'd like to know what you're counting. And that bottom 4 stands for quarter note. Well, a quarter note is that solid circle with a stem. See the first line of notes they give on the page? Those are all quarter notes. Well, here they're half notes. A half note, 2 quarters and a half. 2 halves and a whole, 4 quarters and a whole. You get the pattern? Then it divides in 2. So you got a whole, then a half, then a quarter, and an eighth, and a 16th, and a 32nd. Blech. That's all it is. It divides in 2. So on this line, they're all half notes. So they're worth 2 quarter notes. Well, if 1 quarter note is what you're counting, a half note is worth 2 of those. You're going to hold that note down for 2 counts. So on the F, doesn't matter how fast you count. That's a personal thing. We go nice and slow. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's slow to me. I don't know. So a half note is going to hold down for 2 counts. 1, 2. A quarter note would just be 1 count. 1, 2. And then on 2 you'd have to play something else. So this line here is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 3, 4. 1, 2. You see, so the beat is steady. And by doing this, we know when to play the notes. Then you get to the end there. That last symbol, that is a circle. No stem, just a circle. That's a whole note. A whole note is worth 2 half notes, 2 halves in a whole, or 4 quarter notes. In other words, you're going to hold it down for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're done. So that's a longer note there. Then the only other thing we need is which finger do we use? And they give you the finger to start with. That's second finger. That's your index finger. Remember, thumb is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand, all the others, in these right there, around it, here. I'm going to leave my hand in this position. Now whichever finger is on the note I need to play is the finger I'm going to use. So you have to remember which finger is on which note, or which key. That sounds hard. It's actually pretty easy once you just think about it. Get a mental picture of which finger. Your index finger's on the F. Well, which finger would be on a G? It's one up, so it must be a thumb. And then an F again, and then the third finger's going to play the E, right? Because that's the finger that's on that key. And you just use whichever finger is on these notes to play them. I use the weight to push the notes down. I don't hold the hand still and try and use the fingers. Go ahead and just collapse the wrist a little bit with each of these. Push them down and let the wrist collapse a little bit. So you're sort of using your whole forearm there in the hand to push it down. Because I'm using the weight, it's almost like I'm pulling the note down. Like so. Then all we got to do is add the counting and we got it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Remember, we're only counting to 4. So when we get to 4, we start over again. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. You get the idea? Then when you get to the end, that last note, you hold that down for 4 counts. And that's the way it works. Look at the last line on the page. These are quarter notes, and you got some half notes in here, but you're using the same notes. And you're still putting second finger on the F, so you're still in this position. We call this position a C position, in case you're wondering, because the bottom note is a C. Don't get too locked into hand positions, because eventually the hands are going to be moving all over the place, and you can forget positions. Right now, it just kind of helps you to know where to put the hand. So I'd say put your hand in C position. Just put it there. But in this bottom line, and when I approach a piece of music, first I want to get the notes and the fingering. I don't care about the counting, just get the notes and the fingering. So here we have the F, and then 2 E's, and then we have another E, and a D, and a G, and an E. Play these, say the names of the notes, make sure you can just drill yourself over and over and over. Then once you have the fingering and the notes, then you can add the counting. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. See, a quarter note gets 1 count, a half note gets 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 half notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like so. So you know when to play the notes, you know which finger to use, you know which notes to play. Things are beginning to happen. Now in my videos I like to do a section called a Play With Me section, but I'm going to leave it out on this because I basically just demonstrated these for you. But I'll leave it up to you to be able to play these lines in the left hand and count them out correctly.